Well, Buen Camino Pilgrims, I'm Jeremiah Gibbs. I'm Camino Guide, and today I just want to talk a little bit about my disappointments with not being able to take Camino de Santiago these last couple years, and to tell you what I've decided to do instead this year, because I know that there are probably many of you out there looking for alternatives for the Camino de Santiago that you have planned, and today I want to talk about how I'm dealing with that a little bit. So just a little bit about me. I have taken Camino de Santiago for about 7 years running, every year, every summer. Usually I'm leading groups, and a couple of those trips were solo trips and things like that. But this has become really part of my every year spiritual retreat, and just a pattern in my life over the last 6 or 7 years. And last year, I had planned to take a break. I really was, in some ways, just tired of making the trip, because I have made it so often, and I do love it, but it's exhausting and so on. And so I kind of felt like it would be good for me to take a break so that I could then kind of dive back in with my next group pilgrimage and feel good about that. And then especially as COVID hit, and sort of being cooped up in the house and all that happened with COVID, I decided, okay, I want to try to make a pilgrimage this summer. And so I had a few friends, mostly former pilgrims, that I had talked with, and we were going to make another pilgrimage back in July. We started planning and saying, if Spain opens up, well, what I didn't really predict there was that Spain would open first to EU folks, and Americans were never likely to be on that list, and I just made a misjudgment about that. But really had started talking about July already, and had decided if I could, I wanted to go and make another Camino last year. And then when that was clear that wasn't going to happen, I kind of shifted gears and said, well, what if I planned a trip for May, which would be this coming May, and really started turning my attention to that possibility. And then really about a month or so ago, a couple months ago, really just became clear that that's not going to happen either. I am hearing some word. You might check out Ivar's videos, that maybe by late fall, or at least maybe even late summer, then it might be possible for Americans to make their way to Spain, depending on what happens with vaccination rates in both Spain and the USA. But I may still try to go alone in the fall. I'm not going to plan a group trip for sure. I'm not even sure what the Camino will look like, and so I would never plan a group trip for this year. I may try to go alone later this year. I don't know, but really, as we started to make sense of all that, I just realized I personally needed an alternative for this year, and I imagine many of you kind of are feeling the same way. So if you've already worked out an alternative for Camino, then maybe you would leave that in the comments, because I imagine others that are going to be watching this and be searching for this are going to be looking for alternatives too. So maybe you've got some things that you could share with them. But I have mostly decided that it's not going to happen this year. I would love for it to still happen, but I just have mostly kind of come to a conclusion that's not going to happen this year again. So I wanted to think of an alternative, because I really feel like I need it, especially many of us have had a challenging year and so on, and to have that out of my life is not good in a challenging year. And so really, I go on Camino for 3 factors. So I started looking at possibilities for what we might do that would meet those 3 factors. The 3 factors for me, I do enjoy the physical challenge of the walking. I think there's some satisfaction that comes from the accomplishment, just as there would be with sports or things like that. Sometimes you just feel kind of a confidence and feel good about the physical challenge, and so that I do enjoy that part, although it's certainly not the highlight of the Camino for me, but I do like that part. Much more for me, I appreciate the slow and steady pace of pilgrimage, and the ways that is just an encouragement to me, and really is a spiritual discipline. For me, that's a walking prayer, and it's really an important part of my spirituality at this point, because I have have made this pilgrimage so many times that it is an important part of my own spirituality to have that kind of slow and steady walking pace. So, but those two factors are important, but by far the most important factor for me of the reason I love Camino is I love the relationships that happen when we're on pilgrimage. I love the ways that that relationships happen in the bars and in the restaurants as we're eating together and we're spending time together and talking. That sobra mesa time where you're just, sitting for hours talking over the table. Those are beautiful, rich times for me. And I also think the dynamic of how pilgrims have to care for each other when they encounter challenges is also a really important part of that pilgrimage experience, and really an important part of how relationships are formed. So for me, that relationship piece is like one of the main reasons that I want to ever make this pilgrimage. So I've decided that this year, as an alternative to me making Camino, that I would walk a section of the Appalachian Trail with a group of friends. So we're going to walk probably about 8 days, 7-8 days, through Virginia, through southern Virginia. There's a big hiker festival called Trail Days. Those that are familiar with the Appalachian Trail would know, of course, a lot about that. It's a big celebration, festival that happens in Damascus, Virginia, in the southern part of Virginia, each year. And many of the Appalachian Trail through hikers plan their hike around Trail Days, or some of them that have gone past Damascus might take a shuttle or bus back to Damascus to be able to go to Trail Days and then go back and finish their hike from where they are. So it's kind of a big deal for the thru hikers, and I think that there's some community building that'll happen for us there at the festival. But really, one of the reasons to go to the festival for us is that I'm hopeful that there'll be some thru hikers that have planned to be there for that festival, that we would walk out with some of them, and so there will be a lot of people on the trail, we hope, about that time. So we've decided to make about a week trip out of Trail Days in Virginia in May. And the other reason to choose that section, first of all, is just that the section of trail right after Damascus is through the Grayson Highlands Park, and the mountains are just amazing. There's some 5,000 foot elevations, 4,000 foot elevations, so some decent elevation, some decent climbing that happens in there. Not overwhelming, but certainly some good mountains. And there's lots of just enjoyment and beauty there. There's these feral ponies that are walking around out there and so on. So there's plenty of reason to enjoy that part of the pilgrimage, or that part of the trail. See, for me, I'm already switching into talking about it as pilgrimage. It's not a pilgrimage; it's a hike. But this is very much how I think about it. So really, it has the three things that I look for. I've connected with a place where we might be able to connect with some people, so that part's in there, and it's certainly going to be physically challenging climbing these mountains and so on, and then for sure the kind of slow and steady pace of walking and can pick up my kind of spiritual discipline there. So it meets those things. I will say there's a number of things I'm not excited about it. So if you're a Camino pilgrim and you think, this sounds like a good idea, maybe I'd want to do this. Well, let me say that, first of all, I'm not excited about not having, a warm bed and showers and, the kind of comforts of Camino. Many people don't think about those as comforts, but an albergue is actually pretty comfortable gift when you compare it to sleeping in a tent or sleeping in a lean-to shelter. So I'm not excited about the lack of accommodations. I did this in the Marine Corps. I hiked in slept outside and all that, and I've had enough of that. I'm not a huge fan of just camping in general, so that's not a thrilling part of this for me. I'm not excited about the lack of the table time, kind of the sober mesa. There will be time at camp and there'll be relationships, but it's not as comfortable as sitting around a table with drinking a beer and laughing, and it's very different, I think, probably being on trail than it is to be able to just go to a restaurant and enjoy sitting along the side of the road and drinking a beverage with a friend. But and then the last thing I would say is I'm not excited about the amount of weight that you have to carry to hike Appalachian Trail. We're talking about on Camino, if I have 12 or 13 pounds, that's probably a lot. I walk usually in May and I don't need to carry very much. But on Appalachian Trail, usually you're carrying about 30 pounds because you got to carry your own water, your own food for 4 or 5 days worth, and a tent and a heavier sleeping bag and all those kinds of things. And so it's quite a bit more gear to carry on your back. And we're not going as far distances, so there's some trade-off there, but I'm not excited about that aspect of it either. So there's some things that if you are a Camino pilgrim, then hiking Appalachian Trail is not just an automatic, like this makes sense and just go and do it. There's quite a bit of transition, and it's a very different experience, but it's what I can do this year, and so for me it gets at some of the things that I like about Camino, and I think that it'll be a good trip, and I'm looking forward to the trip in May. But maybe you have other alternatives. I will say one other alternative we talked about. I talked about with a couple of friends about maybe just going and renting like an Airbnb with a group of friends near. We talked about Jefferson National Forest in Virginia. Just going and renting a cabin nearby and just doing day hikes so that we could still come back and cook food together and have that time and have a comfortable bed and shower and so on. And so we talked about that a little bit, and it just didn't come together exactly. So that might be another alternative. But if you have a different alternative, something that you've said, well, this is kind of what I want to do since I can't go on Camino this year, then leave that in the comments. I'm sure that others that are finding this video are going to be looking for the same thing and would love to have some of your feedback. If you like videos like this, then please click the like button. That'll help other people find it as well. And then if you would subscribe, then you can come back and find more videos like this. I do videos on the logistics of Camino. I do videos on kind of the spirituality and motivations of Camino, and certainly do some gear reviews and gear conversations as well. So a little bit of planning help that way. So certainly subscribe, come back often, and buen Camino.